Hi, I'm David Michael Morris, and I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, on January the 14th, and it was toward the end of World War II. So my mom and dad had to go to Memphis. They lived here in New Albany. My mother's family's been here since the days of before it was a state. I mean, they came from Virginia, then they came to South Carolina, and they came here. And the Lamars have been here forever, and so are the Fergusons. So that's the family that came here. My father came here from Missouri, and then my mom and dad got married. They met at Gray's Drugstore in New Albany, and they got married, and then they had Joed, my brother, Joed Morris, and then they had me. And I was born January the 14th, cold winter morning in Memphis, Tennessee, and because there weren't any doctors in town because of the war, it was the end of World War II, and so they had to go to Memphis for the birth. And then I came back, and all my life I've lived up the street here, about 3 blocks up the street at used to be called 335 Cleveland Street. It's now, I think, 401 Cleveland Street. And I'm very sentimental, so I still own my childhood home.
Who were your playmates?
So Bill Stokes and Roger McMillan, Carol Rogers, and Richard Clinton. And of those, I know that Roger is still alive, and he and I worked together. He's vice president of my company, and he was the former chief judge of the Mississippi Court of Appeals. And when he ran, he asked me to handle his campaign. I have no experience in doing it. But actually, Roger and I grew up together, and we met in the first grade. Ms. McAllister was our teacher, and I'm very dyslexic. I have lots of learning disabilities. It's amazing I've made it as far as I have. But I have lots of learning disabilities, but those learning disabilities weren't understood when I was in school. And so she just thought I was a troublemaker. I got spankings almost every day from Ms. McAllister. And I'll never forget, Roger sat right in front of me, and Ms. McAllister drew a Christmas tree on the board and said, "Now everybody draw a Christmas tree in your little notebook." Well, I drew it. She came along, she said, "You're just a troublemaker, David. That's upside down. I'm gonna walk around the room, and when I come back, that Christmas tree better be right side up." So I tapped Roger. "Well, how do you do this?" He said, "Just draw it." And I drew it. He said, "No, it's upside down." I said, "How do you make it right side up?" He said, "I don't know, just draw it." And now I saw Miss Larkin, Ms. McAllister walking up the hallway, so turned the book upside down, drew it, and then turned it back. And she said, "I knew you knew how to do that. You're just a troublemaker. I'm gonna spank you anyhow." It was great. And growing up in New Albany has been the true joy of my life. I'll remember this city, and I was telling you earlier, I would rather be well thought of in New Albany than New York City. And I do all the testing for the city of New York, and I go there frequently, but it's more important for me to be thought up well of here in New Albany than New York City.
So where did you go to school for first grade?
First grade, I went to Cleveland Street School, right up the street, and we had a typical 1940s family. We had a maid that practically raised me, and Lulu Jones will always be special in my mind, and then Cassie May, and then there are other great people. Doris, who actually then, I think she was the first African American to work in any of the downtown stores. She worked for my mom and dad, and she's truly a famous person. You ought to interview her. I mean, she's really great. Yeah, so she took care of me too, and I just grew up. I would walk up the street to 33 Cleveland Street School that came later named after Maddie Thompson, the principal, and it was great. It was just a great childhood. I'd skip up the sidewalk and felt great, and just a carefree kid, really enjoying life to its fullest. And then I would come home. I would eat lunch every day. I'd you could eat in the cafeteria, and I always felt like these kids get to eat in the cafeteria, and I have to go home to eat. 2-minute walk, down to the house, and I would have. So every once in a while, my mother would say, "Well, Lula's not going to be here today, so you probably need to eat in the cafeteria." I'd say, "Yes, I get to eat in the cafeteria." So, and I grew up in New Albany, and then later went to New Albany High School, and I also joined the Scouts under Les Sumner's. Very memorable experience and a very important part of my life. A foundation to a person's life is really important. It's amazing to me. I own Eudora Welty's birthplace, and she wrote the book, One Writer's Beginnings. And it turns out that really, she says this in her writings, that where a person starts out is more important than people think. And I start thinking, more people go to William Shakespeare's birthplace than they do to the house they lived in later on. There may be some truth to that too. Anyhow, so I love the fact that I lived up the street from William Faulkner's birthplace. Les Sumner was an amazing individual, and he was a real steward. When I grow up, I'd like to be like him. He was a young lawyer, and he and Joyce were married, and yet he would take us on camping trips, and he was a real inspiration to have someone of his stature to be a scoutmaster. It was amazing, really. And Roger and I still talk about it. We were Roger, Buzzy Clayton, and I wish I could remember all of them, but all of us were in that. And we went on scout trips. We went to jamborees across the country, saw everything along the way, and it was just a great experience. My brother was a scout too.
Do you think that Scouts led to your adventurous spirit?
I don't know, but something did. Yeah, something did, but probably it certainly helped. I always loved camps all my life. I said, I want to go to more camps. Go to Camp Lake Stevens, where the Methodist camp is over close to Oxford. I said, I need to only go 1 week a year. I want to go multiple years. And then later on, I became a counselor at camps. And I remember I was sent somewhere by the one of the clubs here in New Albany. And I'd done something, I forgot what it was anyhow, so they wanted me to come talk to the club. I said, oh my gosh. I had all sorts of problems with public speaking then, and I later became president of my class and president of the football club and the NA club and all that, and I don't know how I got through it because I had a big problem with being just frozen with fear in public speaking, and so they sent me on some kind of trip, and it was nice. And then they asked me to come back and talk, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I don't know that I can do that." And I remember I think it's Miss Smith too, was the head of the Red Cross here, and she called me up and said, "Listen, Steve has backed out of he can't teach swimming lessons this year. Can you teach swimming lessons?" I said, "Well, Miss Smith, I'm only 15. I don't know that but I'd be happy to help." She said, "Well, you would have to leave today." I said, "Yes, I'll do it. I can leave right now." And my mother's laughing. And so I went to Red Cross, a water safety instructor, and had to lie about my age. And I remember telling I think it was Miss Smith, who was head of the Red Cross at the time. And I said, "Well, I'm a Boy Scout. I can't lie about my age, Miss Smith." She said, "For the greater good of the community, you can do that." And I said, "That makes sense. I sort of like that." So I lied about my age. I was 15, and you had to be 18. Everybody else there was 18. But I did okay. I'm pretty good at those kind of physical things. So.
Where did you teach swimming lessons?
Right here at the swimming pool. And I used to paint the swimming pool, and I was lifeguard there, and I taught swimming lessons there. The swimming pool was a big part of growing up in New Albany. The swimming pool and the community center. Now, I don't think they even have the community center, but it was right next door to the swimming pool. And I was president of the Yak Club. Youth Advisory Club, and that was we worked with we worked with the citizens of New Albany. They put it together for us. It's amazing the stewardship that exists in this town. But anyhow, so and we would get Jimmy Weatherly to come play, and we would get, I always wanted Bo Diddley to come play, and we would have dances there at the community center, yeah. So anyhow, that was a big part of my life, the swimming was. And then later on, I became a camp counselor because I had my WSI too, water safety instructor too, and by the Red Cross. So I was invited to be a counselor at Camp Arrowhead in North Carolina, where big fancy rich people go. And it was fun, and I said, but I'm not old enough to be a counselor, I don't think. And they said, we'll fudge on that. And I said, I'm fudging a lot on my age here, you know. But at about 16, I think I became a camp counselor, and at a famous camp. Because of scouting, I took advanced junior, because I've got my life-saving merit badge and my swimming merit badge. So to do things, to get those merit badges, and I was an Eagle Scout, and to get all those merit badges, you have to do certain things. And then you have to meet with people in the community, and so you have to demonstrate that you can do them. Well, oftentimes learning how to, you become you take swimming lessons. So I took swimming lessons, and I still swim. I'm probably one of the few people in the world that swim the Hellespont 3 times in my life. I swam it one time when I was 40, before it was organized, and I just got a boat, and I paid them to guide me across, and my business partner, Joe Nasser, rode on the boat just to make sure the sharks didn't eat me or take me away. And so anyhow, I swam across the Hellespont before it was really popular, but Browning swam across it, and nobody thought it was possible. In Greek mythology, you know, I'm sure you know, there was a hero would swim it every night to meet his girlfriend, and then he would swim back, and everybody thought that was just mythology. But then I think, no, it was some famous poet, writer, swimming in the 1800s, and then people thought, okay, you can do it, you can swim it. So I thought, well, I got to swim that one day. I need to swim it, it's important to me. So when I was 40-something, I thought, I better go ahead and swim this thing if I'm going to. So I swam it, but it was not organized then. I just did it on my own, and I paid and we memorialized it with signature and everything. And now it's a big organized swim every year, the Hellespont, and I've done it. I did it that one time. It took me, I think, 16 hours to swim it, but now the last time I swam it in a little under 2 hours. That was 2 years ago. So anyhow, I think because I was not quite 80 then, so I'm 81 now. So I must have been, 2 years ago, 79. Yeah, that's right. So that was my last time swimming. But if I swim it when I'm 80, I'll be #1 in my class because there aren't many 80. There aren't many 80-year-old people that swim that thing. So I've always enjoyed.
Competition is getting smaller.
Smaller and smaller. I mean, one way to win is to be the last man standing, you know. So anyhow, yeah. So that's So I learned to swim here in New Albany, and I taught swimming lessons, and I enjoyed that too so much, teaching swimming lessons. And I think that helped me get rid of my fear of public speaking, because you have to talk in front of people but anyhow, so yeah, it was a great adventure.
You mentioned your parents had a business.
Yes, so my mom and dad, my father came here from Missouri, and he had just been through a horrible divorce, and his wife had alcohol problems, drinking problems, and so he was emotional about it. Of course, anybody is. And so but he was a watchmaker, and a certified watchmaker, because the rails cross here in New Albany, which is a very important thing about the city of New Albany. I mean, it's got a lot to do with the beginning and the success of the city. But my father had his watch bench, which actually I donated here. You have it, and I'll show you a picture of it later. But anyhow, so he brought his watch bench, and he came here and set up his watch bench in Gray's Drugstore. And Gray's Drugstore was, later I became a soda jerk in Gray's Drugstore, and then Rogers Drugstore too. But anyhow, see, he was working there, and he was a young man. We never know exactly how old my father was, because he didn't accurately reveal his age ever. And he didn't even tell my mother that he had been married and divorced, because that was such a big no-no in the 40s, you know. So, but he did finally, before they got married. He said it took all my courage to tell her. And so anyhow, they got married, and but they met at Gray's Drugstore. He was working there. He set up his bench in Gray's Drugstore because of the tracks. If you work on the railroad, you had to have your watch tested so often, and you paid money for that. And my father he was a very industrious person. He was a hard worker, and I think I inherited that from him, thank goodness. But anyhow, he could make so much money before they even opened up the store. But they met at Gray's Drugstore. Then they got married at the Methodist church there, and then they bought the jewelry store, and they opened up a jewelry store, and they owned that jewelry store. And then my brother and I'm very sentimental, so I don't like to sell, so I own that jewelry store now. But I own it in partnership with Bill Rutledge, one of the best partners I've ever had in my life, really. He's a great guy, and he takes care of it all, but I love the fact that I still own that jewelry store. And so they had a little mom and pop shop there, and I grew up in that shop, and I played. Saturday night was a big deal here in New Albany. All the farmers would come to town, and they would spend money. So all of the stores stayed open on Saturday night. It was a big event. Saturday night here in New Albany was. I mean, it was almost like a carnival. They would come, and they would park in the middle of the street, and people still say, that's a weird town, New Albany, because people are allowed to park in the middle of the street. So we've been doing that forever, as long as I can remember. But I really was taken care of by the whole town. They just really took good care of me, and I was a little kid, and even as a 10-year-old, 8-year-old, 5-year-old, I would run around town. I knew all about the ins and outs, and the dark alleys, and the cupboards that would go through town, and everything. I knew everything, and just played and had a fun time on Saturday nights. And then I think when I was around 10 or 11, I started, my mom and dad asked me to help them, and so I swept the floors in my mom's house and my dad's jewelry store. And then later, Gray's Drugstore asked me to sweep their floors, and I said yeah. So I became pretty good at sweeping floors. Then I did the same thing with Sappington's. I swept their floors, and then I swept the floor of Rogers Drugstore, which was right next door too. And I was sweeping floors, and I want you to know, they would pay me in silver dollars. And so I've never had a big interest in money. It just never seemed to understand the value of it. I just recently went to school so I could figure out that, and it taught me that money is more important than I thought it was. But anyhow, they would pay me in silver dollars, and I would give them to my mom and dad, and they would put it in, and they would be leather bags that they would keep underneath the display. And in those leather bags were the silver dollars that I made sweeping out. And then I started washing windows, and I swept most of the floors. I think Hit's Barber Shop, I swept that floor, and that was a real challenge because of the hair cutting and everything. I think they just let me to do it for fun though, because they had to sweep that floor more often. But I swept the floor there at Hit's Barber Shop, and then I worked down at Ben Franklin's for Mr. Houston, and but I was in the 1950s. I was making quite a bit just sweeping floors. In fact, somebody even said, I don't think this is true, but I was making quite a bit of money, and there were a lot of silver dollars down there. My mom and dad one time said, can we borrow that? And I said, of course, just take whatever you need. I don't need it. And they said, well, we'll pay you back. I said, I don't care. Yeah, so I've always been a hard worker. Yeah.
So you liked working, but you didn't really care about earning.
I never have cared,
Yeah.
but now I'm learning. I went to school. I've spent my whole life in school, and New Albany High School, and then I went to Millsaps, and I remember Billy Murphy and wanted me to come play football there because I played football at New Albany High School. And we won the championship there, and that was a big deal. And I loved football anyhow. But I was never that good at it. Too. I was good at it, but I never understood the game too much. And but I was fast. I was very agile. And so Spook Murphy was the coach at Memphis State at that time, and he asked me to come play football for a scholarship. I went up there and I looked at those guys. They were really big. I said, "Oh my gosh!" And he was not a part of any conference, so he could redshirt people. So these were not teenagers. They weren't, normal students. He would redshirt them 3 or 4 years and could get away with it because he wasn't a member of a conference. So these people looked big. I remember looking through that cyclone fence. I said, "Holy sofa cushions, these people are big." So I told him no thanks, but I was offered a scholarship to go play football at Millsaps. So I went there.
What year did you graduate from New Albany?
1963.
Okay.
And then they converted it to WD Daniel. What's it called now?
WP Daniel.
Yeah, WP Daniel.
After, maybe not too long after you left.
Yes, that's right.
And
I
then
think it
changed
might have been
back.
WP Daniel when I left.
Okay.
I might have been.
Okay.
Because, we all went to school. High school, junior high and high school was all down on downtown. And then they built a new school, and I graduated from the new school. So that was 1963 that I've spent my last 2 years, I think, at the new school. And then while they were building the school, we all had to go to churches. The school, we went to school at the Baptist church and at the Methodist church, and sort of interesting time for New Albany.
Before we get too far out of your childhood, you mentioned earlier that you spent some time in Oxford around Roanoke.
Oh yes, so Kate Baker, my mother was she was a very pretty woman, and later on when I look at pictures of her, she was really very attractive, and so and she loved to think that she was up, and it was really interesting the way she loved to go to New York and all that kind of stuff, and she wanted to be a part of the world that they saw movies of and everything, and she did a good job of doing that too. Really amazing woman, and she was close friends with Kate Baker. Now Kate Baker and Colonel Baker lived in Oxford, and Kate had a dress shop where they sold dresses for girls, and of course Oxford being the home of Ole Miss, all the young girls would buy from Baker's, and so I've spent a lot of my life in Oxford because my mom was close friends with Kate Baker, and I knew Colonel Baker, and they had lived right next door. When I say right next door, I don't mean close. I mean they were the neighbors of William Faulkner, and so young William, my friend, had a horse, and so he only had one horse, so he would saddle up his horse, and then we would go next door to Mr. Faulkner's, and Mr. Faulkner would saddle up his horse for me to ride his horse. And I remember he looked so elegant in all the pictures you see now, but he wouldn't even lace up his shoes all the way. They were brogans, and he would always have tears in his pants. And of course, I didn't. I was younger and dumber too, both. But I didn't know that this was a great world famous writer at the time. Yeah.
So you were just visiting when you were there?
I was just, my mom and they were close friends, and my families were close all along too. Yeah. I recently, Kate's daughter, one of her daughters, passed away and left something to my children in their will. Still hadn't found out, but anyhow, we were that close. Yeah.
The watch shop.
Yes.
Is
The
that
jewelry
what it's
store.
called? The jewelry store.
Well, it was a
Jewelry store.
watch shop to begin, primarily because the crossing of the rails.
Okay.
It was a big deal, and so my father came here for that reason, and so they bought a little mom and pop shop, and it was a struggle for them all the time. But Mom was really gifted at finding what people like, and she loved that all of her stuff herself. And so she would buy what she liked, and it sold pretty well. So they had a gift store there, Morris Jewelry Store, and I still own that store with Bill Rutledge.
Well, now where is that?
Well, it's the unusual. It's right down on Bankhead, and it's the only one with the roof juts out like this, and it's not a flat against the wall, and it's right next door to where the grocery store used to be, West Grocery Store, and then so there was West Grocery Store, and then there was Gray's, and I think Gray's is a Sugar Reed bakery now. Yeah, and then next to it was, and I think Sugar Reed owns or operates out of the West Grocery Store, but that was a grocery store at the time. And then my mom and pop's little narrow shop, jewelry store, and they worked so hard at it. And sometimes they would have a good year, and they would say, "Oh, this was a good year," and then other times Christmas was. That was it. You always decided whether you were going to make it or not. And I was just a kid running around on the streets and like a street urchin, and everybody took care of me, really. It's the thing, whoever said that villagers raise children is really right. I was clearly raised by New Albany. And they would have a good year, and then sometimes they would have, well, Joanne, I think we're going to have to go down and talk to Mr. Spence, Bank of New Albany. And she said, yes, I guess so. So they would make a loan, and then they would operate on that basis. So it was tough in those days, really. And I don't think it was right after the war. It was tough, but they did pretty good, actually. My father used to joke, and he said, "Well, son, I've made 3 fortunes, but your mom has spent 4." And of course, she was one of the principal people in the store, making sure it was profitable. So I don't really know what her view would have been. She probably said, "I made 3 fortunes," but he was a hard worker. He would go down and work, start early in the morning, and have all the watches repaired. And I think that I brought his bench. I kept his bench for the longest, and I kept the store. Just because I'm sentimental. Yeah. I was in pre-med. All my life I'd studied, wanting to be a psychiatrist. I mean, I read stuff about behavior and psychology all my life. I mean, even as a kid, people would make fun of me in high school. I would say, well, you remember the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People? Well, I memorized everything in that book. I thought people's behaviors are really important. So I'd say, well, I may be wrong. I frequently am. And if so, I want to be set straight. And so Roger McMillan, my good friend, and Bill Stokes would make fun of me for saying that, And Roger still makes fun of me for saying it now. But I studied behavior, and so I want to be a psychiatrist. And so I went to pre-med, and then I played football, and they told me I had to box too. And I said, I didn't think the scholarship covered that. And the coach said, "Oh, yes, it did." And I said, "Okay, yeah." So anyway, I had to box, and I got to where I liked all of it, really. I did. But Millsaps, I joined a fraternity. It wasn't a big part of my life. I always thought it was not the best idea for children, but maybe it is. Maybe it wasn't for me. But I think fraternities are a big social institution that can help a lot of people. Anyhow, I joined a fraternity. It didn't play a big part of my life, but football did, and boxing did too, really, in a lot of ways. So then I graduated from Millsaps, and we were in the Vietnam War, and so I applied for. They said, "Well, if you don't go to graduate school, you're going to have to go to war." And I said, "I sort of think I need to go to war. I mean, I'm red, white, and blue American patriot. I need to go to war." And they said, No. My mom and dad said, No, you need to go to school." So I applied to Mississippi State and got a scholarship there to go into teaching, and I taught there at Murrah Hall in Mississippi State. And I had a dog that I grew up with, and my dog went with me, and they would let the dog come in the classroom with me while I taught there at Murrah Hall. And the dog knew how to climb the steps, and then the dog knew which car to go jump into, and all the students would say, "Can we go watch Chester Lee Jones was his name. Chester Lee jump in the car?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I said, "Chester Lee, go get in the car." And he would run down, and they'd go over to the window. We were on the second floor, third floor. It was a big building. And they would watch Chester Lee jump in the car. And so anyhow, that was my college days there at Mississippi State, and I enjoyed that. It was a teaching scholarship that I had. And then I worked with Dr. Bruce Glick, who was he was a famous immunologist. He studied immunology, and he was the one that discovered the bursa fabricis. The bursa fabricis is a gland that we know where it's located in birds, in the aves, birds. And so I worked with him, and because I was interested in, graduate school. Oh my gosh. So Dr. Russ Levenway was my major professor in Millsaps. And I'd already been accepted to medical school and everything. And there were people here in New Albany that were prominent in the University Medical Center, and they helped me get in, I'm sure. And so I'd already gotten in, and Dr. Levenway said, David, do you know what a psychiatrist does? I said, no, but I've always wanted to be one all my life. He said, I've arranged for you to study with Dr. Ritter, who's the psychiatrist out at the state hospital. Would you do that? I said, of course. You're my major professor. I'll do whatever you say. I'm basically your huckleberry. Tell me what I need to do. And he said, go do that intern. I was out there a month and a half, and I dropped out of med school. I said, holy sofa cushions, I would be miserable being a psychiatrist. And my main job out there was to take, it was a different time, and it was white male receiving because it was segregated. And my job was to get the patients, the male patients, into Dr. Ritter, and many of them I would have to wrestle them down and give them a shot of Thorazine in the bottom, in their buttocks there. And so I'm pretty good at that kind of stuff. I'm physically able to do that. I'm amazed that I was. Yeah. But I watched his interviews, and he let me sit in there because it was an internship. And I said, I would be miserable doing this. So Dr. Levenway saved me. I dropped out of med school and went to study physiology and psychology, the nexus of behaviors and biology. And so I studied there at Mississippi State, but I really studied under Bruce Glick, who was a famous physiologist who had discovered the function of the bursa in birds, but we don't know where it is in humans, and they probably know now. But anyhow, so I published, I did the research for my master's thesis on the embryonic effects of testosterone propionate in male chickens, because it eliminates the bursa fabricis. And what is the effect of that? They don't live long. So I was trying to find out where I wanted to study cancer, and where the behavior in cancer and the intersection of that. So that paper was published in some kind of study about birds, probably. But anyhow, it's the first published paper on psychoimmunology. And because nobody had heard of it, and that was and I was really interested in that. But anyhow, so I along the way I ended up, I got my master's degree at Mississippi State, and then I was faced with the draft here in New Albany, and I talked to the lady there. She's really a steward of good citizenship too. I forgot her name. Ann, I think, was her first name. I wish I could remember. Anyhow, she said, so what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to volunteer. She said, well, because of your studies and your degree, maybe you can get, you might be able to become an officer. And I said, no, I want to go to school to learn to be an officer. I don't want to become an officer. I want to go to school. And my father said, son, you're so misguided. So I volunteered for the military, and all my friends were running to Canada, and I volunteered, and I thought, I'm pretty good at all this kind of stuff, and I'm a good Southern boy. I know how to shoot and all that kind of stuff. And so I did pretty good in basic training, and it's about 600 or 700 people in basic training, and and I was one of the 2 that they promoted to E2, and then I was asked. So I went on to Fort Polk, and I was going to Vietnam, and I was good with that. I thought, yeah, I can do that. And I'm a red, white, and blue American guy. I believe in the country more than most people do, and I think it's a great country. And I said, yeah, we need to fight for it. And my father thought, you're misguided, but I love you. And so I went to Fort Polk, advanced military training after the basic military training, and I was down there, and they came out on this major came out on the field where I was working. He said, "So I understand you're pretty good with bayonet." I said, "Yeah, I'm sort of good with it." And he said, "We show me some stuff." I said, "Yes, okay." He said, "Listen, we've been studying your background, and would you be interested in getting out of the military and coming to work for a research organization of sorts?" And he said, "It's called a Class 2 installation." I said, "No, I'm good where I am." So he said, "Okay, are you sure?" And I said, "No, I'm good." So then about 2 days went by, and a colonel came out. Well, when you're an enlisted man, a colonel, sits at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. This is a big deal. And he said, "Son," I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "We understand that you're interested in turtle eggs." I looked at him and said, "How would you know that?" He said, "Because that's what you wanted to study with Dr. Glick. And you actually were studying turtle eggs because on the phylogenetic tree, turtles are above that. But you were hoping that you could find the bursa aparicis in turtles, so you wanted turtle eggs." I said, "That is so right, you're right." He said, "We will fund your research, and we will find you the turtle eggs you need if you'll come join this outfit." And I said, "Okay, I'll do that." And so it's called a Class 2. It was housed in Fort Rucker, in Alabama, Fort Rucker. Yeah, Fort Rucker. It was housed there, but it reported directly to Washington. So we did research on crazy things. And all I've still, to my knowledge, is still classified. But there was one that they let open, and it was called the Russian Electro-Sleep Machine. And I had a lot of fun with that, and I did the research on it, and that was it. And then I got out of the Army and knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to go get a doctorate. So I went to Mississippi. I went to Southern. I went to Southern and got my doctorate there, and studied under Max McDaniel. And he was my major professor, really a brilliant guy. And he had gotten his degree from Purdue, and it was really a great training program for the nexus between work and behavior. And so I left, even though I did my doctoral thesis on immunology and psychology. I really wasn't interested in that. Became interested in people and work and behavior. So I became licensed in psychology, and then I specialized in industrial psychology, and I was at Tulane. Yes, I was. I was at Tulane, and that was before I went to Southern. And then my young bride came and said, "I've got some great news for you. We're going to have a little baby." I said, "Oh my gosh, I've got to get a real job." I was at Tulane, a graduate student there, and going to study psychology and immunology, and I was studying under some famous people there at Tulane. And when she told me that, I said, "I've got to get a real job." So I left Tulane and I went to Southern, because I went around and interviewed people, and the people at Purdue said just 90 miles north of Tulane is Hattiesburg, and I don't think it was 90, I think it's more like 60 miles, but anyhow, and one of our best students from Purdue is teaching there now. You might want to talk to Max McDaniel. So I went and interviewed with Max, and he said, "Yeah, I might even be able to get you a scholarship." I said, "No, I've got a military pays for all this stuff, and so I'm good." So I went and studied under Max McDaniel, and left Tulane. And then it turned out we didn't have the job. We did later, but it was enough to change my mind and what my direction. I need a real job if I'm going to have children. So went to Hattiesburg, got my doctorate, and then came out and said, "I'll just hang up a shield, see if I can do something." So I went back and talked to my major professor, Max McDaniel, and said, "Max, would you be willing to be a partner in this deal?" And he said, "Yeah, sure." So I did. And he said, "What are we going to do?" And I said, "Well, do you mind if we call it Morris McDaniel?" I said, "No, I don't care." He was a dean at that time at Southern. And so I went up and I said, "Well, you got to have a you got to have a sign that says Morris McDaniel. I said, oh, okay, good. So I went up to the Research and Development Center and said, how much would it cost to get a logo? Can you help? He said, well, how much money you got? And I said, well, I've got $50. He laughed. And I said, well, that's all I've got. And he said, I can tell you that you might want to just do this on your own. Whatever you do is probably okay. So I studied it, and I thought, well, we've got to look smarter and more academic than I really am. So I drew a shield, and I put M in M, Morris and McDaniel, and then I put the symbol of people at work, and then psychology on the shield. So and that's still our logo today. Anyhow, I did that, and I thought, well, this makes us look. A shield always makes you look more important than you really are. And sure enough, I hung out the shield, and we did pretty good. I'd rather work with you than be a dean down here at Southern. Can I move to Jackson? I said, oh, I don't know if we can afford it, but we did. And so he came, and we've been doing it now for 50 years. This year be 50 years, and we do most of the tests. I think we do all of the tests for the city of New York, but we do all of their public safety tests, and we do all the tests for Houston, we do work in Atlanta and Memphis, and along the way I decided that we were working for the Mississippi Highway Patrol because there was a big litigation, and I would sit there and listen to attorneys. They would bring me in, and I was an expert, and they would pay me well. In fact, a lot of money, it seemed like to me then, and I didn't say much. And then they would say, thank you very much, and write a check and give it to me. I thought, I need to learn what lawyers do. So I went to night school. I couldn't afford to do it anyway because my little company was just beginning. So I went to night school there. Mississippi College had just started, had just moved from a private institution to Mississippi College. They just bought it out, and used to be Jackson School of Law, I think. Then Mississippi College bought it, and it became Mississippi College School of Law. And so I started out at Jackson, but immediately it became Mississippi College School of Law. And I remember Leslie Darden was president of the Mississippi Bar. He's from New Albany, and he was a prominent citizen here. Their law firm was a big deal, Darden and Sumner's, and that was the law firm that Les worked with too, my scoutmaster. So all of it sort of came together. But Leslie said, son, are you thinking that he and my mother were close friends, and so he said, are you thinking about practicing law? I said, no, I'm not interested in practice. I just want to understand it because it plays such an important role in personnel testing, and I work with an area where it's highly litigated, testing police, entry-level police and entry-level fire and promotional fire and promotional. It's incredibly litigious, and so I'd like to know a little bit more about law. So I went into it, and then I'm pretty good at taking tests, so I took the licensing bar, and I did well on that. And so I was a member of the Mississippi Bar, but I've really never practiced. I don't think I ever did a case, but I've testified many times as an expert in court, and I think understanding the law really does help you a lot in understanding how to approach that testimony.
When you talk about public safety testing,
yeah,
what is that?
So you
In a
be sure
nutshell.
you be sure to cut me off.
Okay.
All right, so thousands of years ago, people decided they wanted to create this little thing called a town. We're going to have a town, and once we have this town, we can actually chip in together taxes, and we can build schools for our children, and we can have parks where they can play, and commerce will thrive. That was the first decision they came up with, is where do we find water when they created this town? Where can we find it? Because you have to have water to sustain life. The very next thing they decided is we've got to provide safety for the citizens that come to this town. So public safety has always been absolutely a very important part of civilization. But people forget that. And especially the elected officials, they are all of they're our bosses, but they don't really understand public safety the way it needs to be understood, because you've got to fund it very well, because none of these people get into public safety to become rich. They don't. So I thought, well, I'm not going to become rich either. I'm just going to try to do a good job of testing for public safety. And I dumbed around and made more money than I thought I should have. But these people, public safety, like school teachers and like other people that do things for the better, for the improvement of society. I mean, they're incredible stewards, but they don't do that to get rich. Nobody becomes a school teacher to get rich. Nobody becomes a firefighter or a police officer to get rich. They just hope that they'll be able to barbecue in the backyard, send their kids to college, and have a good slice of the American life. And to do that, though, you've got to pay them well. And then they have to do their job. And to do their job, they need to be selected, because not everybody can be public safety. I mean, and they may make a good preacher, they may make a good lawyer, they make a lot of good things, but not everybody can be a public safety. To do this, there are certain innate skills that you have to have, and some people have more of it than others, and some of us have so little of it that they couldn't be a public safety. They just don't have the ability to do it. So I'm in that business of looking at a person and assessing them whether they can make a good police officer or a good firefighter. And everybody says, well, they just shake hands with them. Yeah, I knew his granddaddy, he'll make a good. That does not do it. And it does not work anywhere. And it's the worst way in the world to select people. And so you really want to select people that have the cognitive strengths, that have the character. You've got to have good character, because you're going to have access to a lot of things that require character. And then you've got to care about citizenship, and you've got to care about people. So those are the three things, and I know how to test for it. So when Roger McMillan, who is really he is the smartest person still alive. Bill Stokes might have been the smartest of my three classmates that I grew up with. They were super, super smart. And I hung out with them. It was enough to give me an inferiority complex, I've decided. So if I don't know something, I go to school just to find out about it. That is really amazing that people are willing to sacrifice for public safety. And so I've sort of dedicated my life to helping public safety. And I really want to spend the last season of my life actually doing what I can to make people realize that public safety is more important. And elected officials, God bless them, they're stewards too. They're trying to do the best job they can for the most part. But they don't understand that, in fact, they've got to put more into public safety, because that's the first promise that elected officials made to their citizens. Yeah, we found water, but we've got to keep you safe. And you violate that first promise if you don't do it right. And doing it wrong, they just don't understand, but I do understand it. And I know that these people don't need to be in public safety. These people do need to. So that's what I do. I love doing it.
Do you develop the tests?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you conduct the tests?
Yes, we administer. Yeah. And we just love it too. I think it's so. When the I love the military too. I think that they are really important for, and it's important to have a good, strong defense. So I've always been a big supporter of public safety, but also the military. So when Saddam Hussein fell, Roger came to me and said, Roger McMillan, we grew up together. He said, and he was at that time the appellate chief judge at the appellate court, Mississippi Court of Appeals, and he'd run the election campaign happened, he won, and it's amazing how he did, but he did, because he had strong competition, but I'm glad he did. But anyhow, he said, David, he was Judge McMillan, he said, we need to go over there. We can help them. I said, you're right. we can. So Roger and I too, I mean, we were both in our late 50s or early 60s, and we're still like young and dumb. I can't believe we did it. We flew to, we said, well, how are we going to get there? I said, I don't know. So we flew to Jordan, and then we said, well, we'll get a ride over from Amman, Jordan. We'll get a ride over to Baghdad. And so I said, no, there's a war going on right there. And so you've got to be careful going through there. So we were there staying at the Four Seasons, and finally we found out that there's this new airline that knows how to fly over the Baghdad, called Baghdad Airport, and it circles down like that and lands, Air Jordan. And it's and for $600 a piece, you get a ticket to fly. And we said, well, let's do that. So we both went over there. Now, we didn't have a contract or anything. We saw they have a need for what we do. So Roger said, let's go. And so we went, and we landed at the airport in Baghdad, and it was, there was no one in there. The lights weren't on or anything. And so I said, well, what do we do now? He said, I don't know. I said, well, let's just go through here and see. They don't check passports or anything. You just walk through the airport because there was a war going on. So we got out there, and there were some people getting in this truck, and I went over and I said, hey, we need to find a place downtown to stay. We're going to start talking to the advisor and try to get a contract here to help the stand up the police and public safety, police and fire. And they said, well, what are your plans? I said, well, we've got to have a place to stay first. We don't have any plans. It was so funny. They said, well, come on, ride with us. He spoke to English, and they were contractors, and they had a contract. We did not have a contract. And we went downtown and stayed at some hotel. I think it was Noble Hotel or something like that, anyhow. And we kept going out. We would go out and talk to one general after another, and we really had nothing at all. And we're saying, look, we can help stand up a new police force. And to do that, you've got to be very careful, because you don't want police public safety that's aligned with the past regime. We've got a change in regime. We need people that are not aligned to that, but are aligned to the new regime. So to be careful, you really want to make sure that they first have the cognitive skills, but in fact that they don't create an insider threat for you. Because if you bring somebody from the past regime into the police, then you put an insider threat in there, and they can cause a lot of damage to the new regime that's trying to start afresh. And so we talked to a bunch of people, and every day we went to the barricaded place around the castles that in Baghdad. And we'd go in there, and I'd say, boy, one day we may get a job here, this would be great. And then we finally got a break, and somebody said, well, give me a proposal. And I remember we'd work all night on the proposal, take it out there the next day, and he said, yes, we'll let you field test this. And but we'll do it at FOB. That's first operating base. Anyhow, so we did it at Baghdad Police College, and they said, where do you want? I said, we can stay anywhere. So they put us in this one room that had a bathroom, and we put bunks up there. And I remember there would be gunshots outside our window, and I would go to the window and I would look, and I'd see muscle fires. And Roger would say, do you think we ought to get up? I said, no, I think just, we both had AKs, and we said, just keep the AK close to your bed. We'll go back to sleep, maybe it'll go away. But that is the world that we started that project in Baghdad in, and it was really an amazing experience. And so I remember Mel Gibson, I think was his name, and he said, we'd like to try this test. I think it has merit. So they tried it, and sure enough, they said, if we do this, training is going so much better. I said, of course, because if you've had past experience teaching, if you bring people in and you don't screen them at all, then you've got a normal distribution of people. There are some in here that are not very good at cognitive skills, and the training is going to be wasted on them. But the trainers have to gear it to you have to regress toward the mean. What is the average of the class? Because you can't teach to the upper class, because then you'll leave all. So a normal distribution is killing your efforts here. We need to screen out these people that just don't have any chance at all of training. And so they did, and they said, wow, it's going so much better. So then as a result of that, Roger and I were invited to meet with General Petraeus. And so we went up to some remote camp, and I remember we went up there, and they said, well, we'll fly you up there. I said, no, we'll go our own way, because we had flown a couple of times, and it was Mosul is where I think we met General Petraeus. And that was a very hostile area, a lot of gunfire and everything. And I think maybe we decided, no, okay, we'll take your offer. And they flew us in a helicopter up there. Now I've got pictures of us coming out of that helicopter. So they flew us up there, and we went to see General Petraeus. And he said, it does sound like to us that to reestablish the police, the public safety, we need to do entry-level testing. I said, yes. And I explained to him why. He said, and I remember I had a PowerPoint. I kept showing him. He said, I see a lot of PowerPoint. Just talk to me. I said, no, please let me do the PowerPoint. And I would please say, next slide, please. Next. And Roger still jokes about it. Next slide. I said, but it's so important. He said, you've sold me. Okay, you've sold me. We went into nationwide testing. So all of a sudden we started out with no contract, then we had a small contract, and now we've got a big contract, almost $1 million a month. And General Petraeus used to laugh about it. He said, you get $1 million a month, son, to get shot at. I said, basically, that's it. So anyhow, because it was incredibly, it was war-torn. It was an expression, but it was really full of hostilities. But anyhow, so we then had Operation 6 different locations. We were told our contract, we had to have 6 different testing sites countrywide, and that I had to visit one of those, each site at least once a month. I said, okay, good. So I'm pretty good at staying alive in these kind of positions, and so I said, no, I don't want a up-armored vehicle, because that will be a flag that shoot me, I'm important. I said, I want drivers that are Muslims, that are Iraqis, obviously Iraqi, and I want them to make sure they don't wash their cars, that we blend in, and that's the way we're going to travel. So we would travel, and I would go to each site once a month, and I've traveled all over 6 different locations. The most northeastern one was Sulaymaniyah, then Mosul was one, then Basra, and then Hilla, which was right next to some of the great history. I mean, some of the great sites in history. It was just so fascinating to me to visit some of these sites and sort. But anyhow, so we had 6 different locations around the country, and it was a big success. We did that for 3 years, and then finally the military and the government said, we've spent too much money in Iraq building it up. And we did. We spent a small fortune there. The country did. And so our project was over, but it was well reviewed and well thought of. So I've always thought that, in fact, this is something that whenever you have a war going on and a change, it's important to consider insider threat. So I developed these tests that we used in Iraq, and they're now known as counterproductive work behaviors. But then it wasn't known as anything. But I started studying the old intelligence test. There's this woman who's well known in our field called Robin Enwald, and she had developed this line of questioning that brought together biodata and other just direct questioning. And it was really not well known very well, but she had started her business, and so I've never met Dr. Enwald at all, but I thought, I've worked with some of the great people in our field in industrial psychology. In fact, ETS had recommended us to Saudi Arabia when they wanted a test for loyalty. And I said, why are you doing that? And Michael Rosenfeld was one of the chief scientists at Educational Testing Service, the largest testing service in the world, and they do all of the GMATs and all these tests, So, he said they recommended us, and so they this general in and this is going to anyhow. We finished the work in Iraq, and it was great. And then the war started in Ukraine, and I went immediately. I tried to volunteer, so I called up the Canadian embassy because American wasn't getting involved in it, but you could volunteer to fight the Canadian embassy, and so I'd also hoped that I would get into one of the Ivy League schools. I applied to every one of them, thinking I'd be lucky if I got into one because I wanted to find out more about business. I'd been sort of successful in some things, but on others I hadn't been. I just wondered why some things worked and others didn't, and my insecurity that go get educated. And I thought, well, if I'm going to go to school again, I want to go to one of the best schools because I believe there's quality. There's a factor in that quality. So I applied to everyone. I applied to Oxford. I applied to Wharton, Penn, and Yale, and I don't know, all the Ivy Leagues. Yeah. So I applied to all of them, and I was being interviewed for the Oxford. And I said, they said, so, at your age, you're 79 years old, 78, I think then. Why should we take this position we have to give to a person younger? And I said, well, I used to play college. I used to play football. And in football, there are 4 quarters. And I know I'm in the 4th season of life. And I'm good with that. But I can still throw a long pass, and I still have all my timeouts, and I can win this game. And they all cracked up laughing. I said, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get into this school. And so I called and found out I got to go there, how often, everything. And I said, I withdrew immediately. I said, I've got to apply to a school here because I can't afford to fly to Oxford twice a month or whatever it was. And so I applied to all the others, and then got into every one of them. Darn, I can't believe it. And it was just, I feel like they all checked the wrong box. I kept holding out for Yale because I wanted to go to Yale, because I love their philosophy. Even though I'm going there to find out about money, I think that it's wrong just to ruin society so that you make more money. So the standard C corporation, by law, it is you're supposed to make the most money for the stockholders. And even though I've sat on boards before, and I'm a red, white, and blue, believe in capitalistic, something's wrong when Disney lays off 8,000 employees just to give the stockholders an increase. I think something's wrong with that, fundamentally. So at Yale, I wanted to find out, but Yale's mission is for business and society. I said, yes. So I think that's right. So I think if a corporation's right there and they can make more money by dumping more poison into the lake, but if their production, they can increase their production, but they'll poison the lake, and the people around the lake are living on that lake, I think something's wrong with that. So I believe that society should play a role in our industry, what we do. So Yale was perfect for me. Anyhow, so I went there. I got to tell you, most of these people could have been my grandchildren. They were so young and they were so talented. But anyhow, it was a great experience. It was humbling for sure. That's for sure. Because and I'm good at working hard, so I did pretty good there. But I worked hard at it too. I mean, everybody else wanted to go out and play and drink and carouse and do like students are supposed to do. And I would say, no, I got to go work. I got to go. First, I got my company I got to worry about, and I got to study my homework. And so it was hard. It was hard for me to go to Yale, but it was great. And it was a great experience, and it taught me that in fact financial money is important. Everybody knows that, and I'm thick-headed, but I finally decided it was. So I'm trying to use the latter part of my season of life, this 4th season of life, to actually help public safety. So I'm writing a book. It's called The First Promise, and I think that I can be successful, but I keep being told by people that are helping me that you've got to write more stories. And I said, no, it's not about me. And they said, well, do you want to sell the book? And I said, yes, of course. To have the impact, I need to sell the book. And they said, you got to tell more stories then. I said, okay, I will. I remember my son said, you know, when you go to school, you're going there for the knowledge, but don't pass up the social experience, because these will be some of the most incredible people you'll ever meet in your life. And so I spent more time than I normally would socializing, not a lot, but they would drag me out to a bar every once in a while, and I would laugh about it. But I enjoyed their company a lot, and still do. And I have to say, some of my friendships there will last forever, and they're really great. I go to Ukraine. I go twice a month to Damascus, because they are in a regime change. They need what I know. And so my partners there are saying, we won't do this for less than 10 million. I said, we'll do it for 40,000. Are you kidding? I said, no, it's 10 million. I said, no, that's the wrong way to look at it. We just want to do the work. Then they'll see how valuable it is, and we'll get more, and you'll be happy. And they said, no. And so anyhow, we have nice dialogues, but I love my work, and I that is my mission. I'm there to help public safety, and I really feel lucky that I've gotten this far in life. And I attribute it all to New Albany, Mississippi. So I called Roger up, and my business partner, Joe Nasser, who's a love of mine. I just love that man. Anyhow, so I said, listen, there's something about that Silk Road, that commerce has followed that Silk Road. We need to be more familiar with that path than the rest of the world. And just think of the adventure, too. So I talked them both into doing it. Now, Roger, I don't think, no, he was not. He was not with the company then. He was the chief judge. So, and my business partner did it because, I said, come on, you got to do this. But I tried it on my own first. I left my family in Powderos, in Greece, and where we've spent our summers. And then I went on to try to explore doing it on my own. I said, man, I got in a lot of trouble. I was going into some areas that are really hostile, like PKK operate, and they're by the country of Turkey calls them terrorists, and they're really very active. And I got stopped by them, and it was I got pulled out of the car with guns pointed at me. And I remember the cold steel against my head there, and I thought, my goodness, this is really. If I'm going to do all this stuff, I'd rather do it with someone. So I came back after that first adventure and I remember I got out to Mount Ararat, and I saw Mount Ararat, and I said, that's impressive. It's where the Noah's Ark's supposed to be up there somewhere. Anyhow, so I got there, and I said, I don't want to do this by myself anymore. So I talked to my business. I said, come on, I'll do this. I'll pay for it, but I need you to do it. And then let's get Roger to go with us, because we need somebody smart going with us along this way so we don't get killed. And so we talked both of them in it, and we did it over about a 3 or 4 year period of time. And I said, we have to write in our journal every day. And I don't know how I got them to do it, but we did. We wrote in our journals every day. And then we started out in Istanbul, got pictures along the way. And one time we were asked to give a presentation to one of the schools up there, and I was so excited. I created a PowerPoint, and I thought we need to turn that into a video. So I'm working on that, trying to create a video for it. And Roger said, why are you doing that? And I said, well, it might be inspirational. This big world, and I believe it's important to see the rest of the world. I believe Muhammad, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he said, don't tell me what you know, tell me where you've been. And I think there's value in seeing the world. And I think if we can provide inspiration for people to do it, that's fine. But anyhow, we did that over 3 years. And every time we would land, we would have to get to where we could get to an airport, and we had a translator. We didn't have guides, we had a translator, because I didn't want guides. I know how they do things. But then we would go, and then we retraced the trail. Started in Istanbul in the 90s, I think. And then, started in the middle of the late 90s, and then we ended up in the Pleasure Palace, the Great Khan's Pleasure Palace in China in the 2000. I remember it was interrupted by 9/11, and because you couldn't do anything, so we had to wait. And then we went back that last time, and we completed the trip from going over the Tian Shan Mountains, where Marco Polo really went. We actually went that route. It's amazing. I mean, every day I couldn't wait till the sun came up so I could see what we're looking at. I mean, really. And then Marco Polo talked about the Gobi. There's a section of the Gobi Desert that's really, really unusual, and you can hear the sands. In Marco, he said you can hear the sands making music at night. So I said, we got to spend the night out there in that desert. And they said, Roger said, you know what that desert, what the meaning of that desert is? No, he said, when you translate it, it means you go in, you don't come out. I said, that's great, we'll come out. So we paid, and they put tents up out there, and we rode camels out there to the desert, and as part of the subsection of the big Gobi Desert. And we spent the night out there. But we actually went all the way through China, but we had a rule. You had to write in the journal every day, and then we couldn't fly. You had to be overland. We did cheat a little bit because the Caspian, we went to the Caspian Sea so many times, 2 or 3 times, and couldn't get across. So I finally said, enough of this. Okay, let's violate our rule. We'll fly across. We flew across, and it was really, it's an amazing story. It takes too long, but I mean, we went places that tourists have never gone and still would never go. And we went through all of central Turkmenistan. Who goes to Turkmenistan? Nobody does. I mean, it is one of the most unusual countries in the world, even today. And I remember when we landed there, they were amazed that somebody was coming there. And they said, would you like, because they're right on this Caspian Sea, so caviar is nothing to them. They said, would you like a little caviar? And caviar, that's rich and glorious kind of stuff. So yes, they brought a whole plate of it. I don't like it was because they're right there next to it. I mean, I remember Roger and Joe and I eating caviar there on the other side in Turkmenistan. It was run by a man. He took over right while we were doing that. He renamed himself. He's Turkmenbashi, a big man in Turkmenistan, and his son now rules it. And they're a very unusual country. And everything's painted a certain color. Everything has to be. It's a total autocrat. Yeah. And I remember Roger and I love to go buy carpets everywhere, so I got carpets from all over the world. So there was this carpet fair, and most of the people in that part of the world, they have markets, and it's a market where they come together and they do sell things. And so we were in Turkmenistan and said, well, let's go to the market so I can get a carpet. So we went to the market, and we had to travel with cash, because the kind of places, the credit cards weren't accepted. So we had cash, and there was a pickpocket there. And we had the money split up between us, and Roger had a third of it, several thousands of dollars in his pocket, and this pickpocket picked his pocket and stole it. So we were saying, oh my gosh, we've got to get money. And so I said, well, we're not going to get any money around here. So we finally went up to Kazakhstan from Turkmenistan, and we got some money there on the credit card. Yeah, a lot of fun.
It sounds a bit risky.
That's an understatement. Yeah. I think there are 2 institutions that are underrated and undervalued by elected officials. One of them is education. So we would always go see a school along the way, and we would always meet cops and talk to them along the way with our translator.
You've had all these great adventures. Do you have anything left on your bucket list? Do you have a bucket list?
I had one for so long. The book, I think, is my bucket list. Yeah, the book, because it's hard. I mean, I thought I said, how many words do I have here? And so it told me you have 70,000. I said, oh, is that enough for a book? And they said, yes. And they said, but it was not 70. I didn't know how to ask, but it was characters. So I didn't have, I mean, it's hard. I asked my brother, I had dinner with him last night, and he's a writer. He said most of his books are around 60 to 70,000 words. I said, man, it's hard writing. It really is, and it takes a lot of discipline, I think. And so I'm having to write proposals for Damascus. I'm having to write proposals for that, and then I try to get in a little bit of time on the book. Yeah.
Are you still actively working out and
big
like
time.
training for something?
Not for just. I know that I'm in the last season of life. I'm really good with. I'm okay with that. But I know that if I can get a few more years out of this body, that would be really good for my bucket list is to make my company sustainable. Because the people that built this company, I mean, I was just drinking coffee, overlooking it. Really, I've seen it happen so many times with people in my field. They sell their company, and the way the C Corporation works is they buy the company, they borrow money to buy the company, they lay off the middle managers, the people that built the company, in order to pay for the purchase. And then they try to restart it again, or they they bought the company in the first place because of competition. So I jokingly, people call me up and say all the time, say, well, David, at your age, you've got to be thinking about selling this company. And I said, well, no, I'm not. And they said, well, what are your plans for retirement? And I said, I've got the best retirement plan. They said, do you have a succession plan? I said, I've got the best succession plan in the world. And they said, well, what is it? I said, it's called death. That usually shuts them up right there.
Leave me alone.
Yeah, leave me alone. I'll give me a chance. I think I can, if I can. So my bucket list is making the company sustainable, and because the people that built it really deserve that. I mean, I've got people that have been working with me for 40 years. Who has that? I mean, really, nobody works for ThinBack, and they're still working there after 40 years. That's amazing to me. So I think it's worthwhile that if we can make a sustainable company. And then the mission that we're on is really to help public safety and to improve public safety. And I'm in this business called, I'm just a simple test maker, but it has so much to do with whether public safety is functional or not. And it absolutely, for instance, if you hire the wrong person and they leave within 2 years, it costs that industry, that little public safety company or police department or fire department, it costs them $156,000 on average for every person that leaves. So they're making so many mistakes by hiring people that were never good fits in the first place. I mean, this idea, we're going to go nationwide. We're going to increase the funnel of people that we can hire. Well, that sounds good, but the truth of the matter is your best public safety people are already home. They're right here. They've invested. And if you get someone in California to come to New Albany, Mississippi, they're going to stay here, and you're going to pay for them and everything. It's $156,000, and then they're going to go back home to California the first time there's an opening there, because everybody wants to go home again. And so it's important to help people, the decision makers, the elected officials, understand how we need to help public safety do better. So that's it. That's my mission. So my bucket list is I'm healthier than I work out all the time. And I've been doing that now for about 5 years, and I study health a lot. I want to know how I can get another year out of this body, and that's important to me. Yeah. I'm always interested in what caused people, the motivation of people. I wondered, why do people do the things they do? So I wonder why I was interested in it, but I read books on psychology in the 8th grade. I mean, I thought it was great stuff. And when I read How to Win Friends and Influence People, I think it was published in the 40s or something like that. And I read it in the 8th grade, and I would learn and quote it and all that. And my friends would make fun of me. What a geek I've been all my life, really. I'm just a geek.
It's very interesting for you were just a kid.
Yeah.
To be interested in
and I
something
wanted to be
like
a psychiatrist until I found out what psychiatry is. I said, oh, holy sofacutions. I can't believe that I would have been miserable all my life if I had gone to med school.
Do you think that our country is doing what they should for public safety?
No. Easy answer. I don't know what they should be doing, but that they're not doing what they should be doing. We need better selection systems. We need better pay systems. For instance, police chiefs and fire chiefs, the fact that they would take that job, that's amazing to me, because all it takes is somebody drops a dime on and calls the city council and says, member, and says, Chief so-and-so is a scoundrel. You need to get rid of him. That city council runs the show. They call Chief so-and-so and say, Chief so-and-so, we're going to ask you to leave. And they leave. They've got there's no insurance there to cover. They've got to insure chiefs. And I need to educate chiefs, to train them that when you sign that contract to be a chief, there needs to be a clause in there that if you're going to fire me, you're going to buy me out. Do your vetting, make sure you get good people on the front end, and make sure you do the right thing for police and fire. And fire are not, everybody thinks police, but fire really, if you study the system the way I have as a geek test maker, really that's all I am. But that's the most challenging job in the world of work. It's only one that's more challenging than being a firefighter, and that is the President of the United States. That is, I mean, we see all these people become president, and all of a sudden they leave with gray hair. I mean, it's incredibly stressful. And being a firefighter really is, the cognitive demand is really high, but also your ability to tolerate seeing some horrible things, some of the worst things. And I mean, I've been in war, and I've been in firefighting, and I got to tell you, what they can face on a daily basis, incredible. And yet, on the other hand, they go to work every day, and they say it may be just a boring day, or it may be the most exciting day of my life, and I've got a chance to make a difference. That's the kind of reward that we need to make sure that we reward these people. Yeah, for being public safety, yeah.
One of the quotes from you that I found very interesting was talking about diversity in a police
Yes.
system, or whatever you would call that, and how important that was.
It is so. I was asked to speak. I'm the only non-public person, non-government person to ever be asked to address the General Interpol Assembly, and I was there, and Ron Noble was the Secretary General, and he came up and said, "You'll be on in just a few minutes, David." And I said, "Okay, good." I said, "I don't see anybody else here from private industry." He said, "To my knowledge, you're the only person ever to be invited to address the General Assembly. This is the rulemaking body." And I said, "Wow." And thank you very much. And I thought, wow, I better say something important here. So I said, so I got up there and I started. I said, over 150 countries represented here, and countries where there's not a well-developed infrastructure, police and fire are one and the same. When I was in Uganda doing the work there, the police are the fire too. So I said, you are, it's so important for you. You're not like the citizens, the employees of government, like the other, because you are the face of government. This is what people see when they're in need. This is what they see on a daily basis. They don't see the electricians, the engineers, the street sweepers, because when they're in a state of need, this is who they see. And when that person is there and says, "You're okay now, we've got you," it's so important to see diversity. And because if you don't see it, as a psychologist, when you see people like you, there's something internally that happens. You relax a little bit. If there's not diversity in public safety, I think that government is courting dissension. And it can vary in degrees of dissension. It can end up being a watch ride, and that's a lot of dissension. But people need to feel represented in public safety. So that's what I said. So education in public safety is so important to our success as a civilization, because monuments don't last too long, but ideas do. And safety is critical. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. But yeah, I was a graduate student. I was teaching at Mississippi State, as I've told you about, and I was in Murrah Hall, and for some reason or another, I decided, wouldn't it be fun to go down the Mississippi River on a raft? And they said, yeah. And so I asked all my friends, I said, would anybody want to do that? Oh, yeah. 20 or 30 people said, yeah, we'll go do that with you. So I had a place there, and I built a big raft, about 15 by 10 feet, and I knew it wasn't big enough for 20 people. I was worried about it, but I could put a little pup tent on it so we could have a place to sleep at night. And then I got a trailer, and then I went around and said, well, we're ready to go. No one. It was easy. It's in psychology, there's this gradient, and it's called, as you approach something that's fearful, as you get closer, your reluctance to go any further increases with the distance. So that gradient was there. I mean, I was clearly, no, I'm not going, you're crazy. And so I said, well, I'm gonna go. And then this guy came up, and he said, he was a friend, and he said, he was a graduate student with me too. And he said, well, I'll go with you. And I said, okay, good. And he said, but by the way, when we get supplies, we need to get a lot of alcohol. I said, really? He said, because I can't swim. I said, holy sofa cushions, I can't believe you can't swim. So I got him a life preserver. I said, you're going to wear that life preserver every day. So he was a photographer. He took amazing photography, pictures of the trip and everything. And I remember we were out there on the raft, and there was an earthquake. And I was on the Mississippi River, and it tilted, and I thought, what an amazing experience to experience an earthquake from a raft on the Mississippi River. But anyhow, we got over there, and he said, so how are we going to do this? I said, well, I don't know. He said, do you have a plan? I said, no, we built a raft. And he said, well, that river, I looked at it, I said, we got to have a motor. He said, yeah. So we went across to Arkansas, and we were up there in Tennessee. We went across to Arkansas, and Memphis is where we put in, right below Memphis. And we went over there, and he said, well, what do you want this motor for? And I said, we were renting it. I said, we're going to go do some fishing, and we'll bring it back in so many days. He said, okay, good. And we had to put a credit card up and all that. And I remember I had a Diners Club. I didn't have much money at all. Gee whiz, that was amazing. Anyhow, so he let us have the motor, and it was a little 5-horsepower motor. So we just tried to stay close to because the barges were, I mean, it's a busy river. It's amazing, and I'll never forget that darn thing. But anyhow, we went all the way down, and then parked and then hitchhiked back to our car, and then with the motor too. With the motor, we hitchhiked back to our car, and then we took the motor back over in Arkansas. And he said, "Would you catch any fish?" I said, "Not enough, not too many fish."
How long did it take?
I think it was about 4 days, not too long, really. And that little 5-horsepower motor was just enough because the currents in the river are big. I mean, you can get in a back tow that will actually, you've got to do everything you can, and just like swimming, you can't swim against it. You've got to go with it to get out of it, and then you're out in the middle of the river, and then so it was a heck of a journey, really. But we had a pup tent, and we slept in the tent, and we'd pull over at night. And the biggest problem were the mosquitoes, really. I'm working in Lebanon right now, and that's one of the most resilient countries I've ever seen in my life. And it's amazing. I mean, it defies everything I've ever seen. But the Constitution requires them to have diversity. The Constitution requires so many Christians to be a part of the legislative body, so many Muslims. I mean, it's required. So that diversity is forced on government, and they're pretty resilient too, to tell you the truth. And our country is a democracy, and its strength comes from the chaos of democracy. Because if you're an autocrat, you can easily say, this is the way we're going to do it. So I own my whole company, and I bought out, after Yale, I learned that they could fire me, so I bought out all the stockholders. There weren't that many, but I bought them all out. But knowing what I know, I said, no, we're going to run this company as a team, and the country needs a team, and it needs to have that approach. The diversity of the citizenship is the strength, and it's also the source of chaos too. It just is. It comes with democracy. It's not easy, and it's a little like life and death. You want something easy? Rest in peace. Death, it's real easy. That's why they say rest in peace. You want life? You're going to have chaos and challenges, and that just comes with it. But I think our country is an amazing institution, and it's the greatest country the world's ever seen. I mean, it really is. But we need to encourage diversity of thought and membership and leadership too, I think. And the first living president I ever met was Dwight Eisenhower. So my classmates at Yale said, David, can you tell us, the professors said, David, can you tell us about the age difference? And I said, well, I could tell you, but I think, let me just tell you one thing. The first president I ever met as a live president was Dwight D. Eisenhower. Whoa! I mean, but actually I met Truman too, but not when he was president. But I met Eisenhower while he was president. And so I've learned not to quarrel with presidents. And don't quarrel with the leadership. Try to align with them as much as possible and try to support the things you believe in. So that's it, yeah. It's important for us to understand our needs psychologically, but we're better than we think we are as a country and as a culture too. I mean, I've seen so many other countries, and I got to tell you, I kiss the ground every time I land in this country. I mean, it's so incredibly amazing, and it's so much better than the others. And I know that's not politically correct to say something like that, but we are, like most people, we are more important, and we're more amazing than we know we are, because I think the strength comes from our efforts and our origins. It took crazy people to get on a boat. They had to be full of adventure too, to get on a boat and say, we're going to sail across this ocean, and we're going to land in a country we've never been to before in our lives, and we're going to start a new life. The willingness to start anew, I think, is an amazing strength that is in America. But I think we're the ancestors of people that were full of adventure too. So maybe I share that with them.
Sounds a lot like you.
I don't know that I would have been brave enough to take my family and get on a Mayflower. I mean, that I think is amazing. And then of course there was a big incentive to get the hell out of Dodge, because it wasn't really safe where they were. So they were looking for a new and better place. And if it'd been great where they were, I'm not so sure they would have gotten on that boat either. Yeah. So, but I think that we are really an amazing country in every sense of the word, in almost every dimension. And are we in trouble? Of course we're in trouble. We're always in trouble. And it's best for us to realize we're in trouble, because there's a lot of work, and it needs to be done. So it needs to be done by people that understand there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Listen, Syria is so beautiful. They've got so much economic potential. There's the birthplace of the largest religion in the world, and people are nuts about it. They'll go there for tourist industry. So the first thing they did when I was going in, I was told I was the first person right after the fall of the regime, that I was the first American to enter. And they said, so where are the other people? I said, there's nobody else crazy enough to come. So I'm here. And this guy said, so you want to enter Syria? I said, yes. And he said, let me get someone that speaks English. I said, okay, because there wasn't anybody. The regime, this was in January, this past year, not this year, the year before it. It was right after the fall. I knew that they needed our help. They need it desperately. But they're not going to, the elected officials, they're trying to do the right thing. And they don't know. So everybody, I was telling Roger Wicker, who's really a great senator, I said, Roger, you need to let them know that, in fact, this guy may not be perfect, but he's our best shot, Syria's best shot for new leadership. And he said, well, you know, he used to be a terrorist. I said, yeah, when I was in Baghdad, we had arrested him. He was incarcerated. And so I said, I took a cigar cutter with me because I thought if I meet the president, he's going to ask me to show penance, and I'm going to cut my little finger off. Say, I'm so sorry for arresting you. But I have not met him yet. But anyhow, they need help so much. They do. And they don't understand. I mean, they're elected officials, but I told Roger, I said, you know, Roger, I know we were both raised as Christians in North Mississippi. Great place to be raised as Christians. And there's a lot of things that can happen on the road to Damascus. And he laughed. And so one morning I was there, and I was, you know, trying to go meet officials and meet people. And it was Sunday morning. And I thought, well, my mother in New Albany, Mississippi would appreciate it if I were to put on a coat and go to church. It's Sunday morning. So I'd been working out. And so I still had tennis shoes on and workout pants, but I did put a coat on. And I asked, where's the closest church is, Christian church. They said, well, there's an Orthodox down there. And they said, you might find it interesting because it's St. Aeneas' chapel. And I said, yes, I would find that interesting. And they said, you just walk down this street and you turn left, and you're going to walk down this and dead end right into it. So walking along Damascus is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. And yet they need exactly what I can do for them. But I'm in a different mode here. I'm saying, well, I'll go down here to this church. My mother would be proud of me, but I put on a coat, make it look like I was a little dressed up, you know, good Southern boy going to church. And I walked in there. I knocked on the door and I had my phone trying to make sure, and I realized it's a dead-end street. So I was walking on the same stones that Saul walked on before he became Paul. He walked in this same building, St. Aeneas, and he was blessed, he was baptized, and the shingles fell from his eyes. And I thought, oh, it's amazing history here. And so the Orthodox priest came to the door and he said, hi, can I help you? And I said, yes, I wanted to come to your services. I hope I'm not late. And like a good priest, he said, you're never too late, my son. I laughed. He said, so you're an American? I said, yes. He said, so are there others? I said, no, I'm the only one crazy enough to be here. I said, but am I late for service? He said, well, to be truthful, no one else is here. And I said, well, it's Sunday and this should be here. But anyhow, I said, look, I know that you can't take pictures of everything. I can't take pictures, but here's my phone. You take pictures of whatever you think is appropriate. And I'll just sit here and reflect on the history. And so he took a picture of me, and I'll send it to you too. But it makes me look so much more reverent than I am, because I'm not that reverent. But I was enjoying the moment, and but he took pictures of everything, and I thought, my goodness, Saul walked the same path. And so I was telling Roger Wicker, it's possible things can change. He said, maybe, but trust. But I said, yes, like your good former president said, trust but verify. Reagan said, trust but verify. So I said, but you need to remove the sanction because Syria's in trouble. They've got no hope if you can't remove those sanctions. And so I remember one morning he said, he sent me a text, if you're close to a TV, you ought to watch it. And it was President Trump saying, I'm gonna remove this. I said, holy sofa cushions. They got a chance. But so when I crossed over that first time, they said, so we need to get, so you're an American? I said, yeah, there's my passport. He said, we need to get someone who speaks English. So this guy came up and said, it was chaotic. It was crazy. People, there's no government at all. There's no enforcement. If you're in trouble, they just shoot you out, take you out, shoot you. That's no government at all. Really, it's very in shambles, and they have a lot of need. So here I am an American trying to come into Damascus. So this guy came up and he spoke pretty good English. He said, so sir, you want to come into Syria? And I said, yes, sir. He said, why do you want to? About this time, a guard on either side with AKs, automatic weapons in hand, got on either side, full mask covered. You couldn't tell who they were. And pushed up against me like that. I mean, I knew, okay, you know, I don't know what's going to happen. They'd probably just take me out and shoot me, and they weren't even worried about getting me buried, you know. And so I thought, well, what I say is going to be important. I hope I say the right thing. And he said, so why do you want to come into Syria? And I said, well, I'm an old man. I would like to see Damascus in Syria before I die. And I smiled, and he smiled. He said, I like that. And these two guys just disappeared. And I went back outside, and my driver said, I can't believe you got in. I said, that's a miracle. And so then I drove down and stayed at Beit El Wadi, which is right in the old town. And I was told to stay there, and I don't know, I never know what I'm doing. I get there, and these two guys show up, and I wonder what they are, and they said, we're here to drive you around. And I'd taken a Syrian lady who was a friend, and she said, contact these people, they may be able to help you. So obviously the email had been intercepted or something, because later on it turned out these guys, how did they know me? I don't know how they knew me. But anyhow, so later on I'd said, no, I don't need any help, I'm alone. And then I sent an email to her, and she said, I'll tell them that you're at the Beit El Wadi Hotel and to go there. And so these two guys came up, and Ed and Somer. And Ed and Somer met with me, and I'd never met them before. But they were real people. These other two, I mean, I'm still physically pretty able. These two guys could make mincemeat out of me in seconds. I mean, they were huge guys and really buff. But these two looked like normal people, still, of course, young, but healthy. And they said, so what do you, I said, well, I think we can make a difference. And so now they're still part of the Mars McDaniel team. They're there, and it looks like we may have gotten traction now with this guy that says, I can get you. And then along the way, Lebanon needs help because they're trying to get rid of the terrorist factions in Lebanon. Very diverse country too, though. But they need to get rid of the extremists. Hezbollah is really the problem. They need to get rid of them. And they're trying to do it. But it looks like I may get to play a role in that too. Pretty excited about it, really. Yeah.
Exciting life.
Yeah.